How you doing today, folks? And welcome to part 2 of my knife collection. The last video was 17 minutes long and I barely even touched the surface, so this time we're gonna go a little bit faster. We got a whole bunch of stuff to get through. I think I've bought like 17 or 18 knives since the last one on top of that. So I don't even know exactly what the price point is at, but still, this is gonna be part 2 of my $30,000 knife collection, even though it's definitely more than that now, and I don't want to think about how much more. As always, please like, subscribe, share, and most importantly, please comment, because I want to talk to all of you. Anyways, folks, let's get started. This time, let's start off with some fixed blades. This is my Bradford Guardian 4. The ergonomics on this knife are genuinely insane. You are required to use the finger choil because just back here just doesn't really feel good. But if you actually let your hands breathe and you just kind of sit here like this, like the ergonomics on this knife are some of the best I've ever handled. And for a fixed blade, it's really, really important. I've had this knife for a couple of years now. I've used the absolute hell out of it. The micarta has patinaed beautifully. Could actually use probably a bit of a wash. There's some, not too sure what that is, to be honest. I use this knife to process food, to EDC carry, to open boxes, to fucking do pretty much everything. This is a great all-around knife. Moving on from that, another one of my favorite EDC fixed blades is this very, very cool Tucson knife. These very interesting snakewood scales, copper liners, 14C 28N steel, and this knife is ridiculously sharp, dude. This thing goes through everything like pretty much butter, including myself, because I've cut myself with this knife really bad before. It also comes with a pretty damn decent sheath. I was actually really impressed with this knife. I paid, I think it was $48 for this knife. Normally go for between, $75 to $80. Usually on eBay, I got lucky. But even for $75, $80, let's even call it $100. This knife is fantastic as far as a fixed blade. This thing is amazing. Moving over to folders, this is a Hewitt Knives one-off. I've actually had this knife for a long time. I first got it in hand. I kind of roasted it, to be honest with you guys. But over time, I actually really enjoyed this knife. The ergonomics are kind of strange. It's all steel construction, so it's very, very heavy, which personally I've grown to like. The carbon fiber clip, while being weird, is surprisingly functional. RWL34 steel. And overall, it's actually pretty damn comfortable in hand. There is blade play side to side. There is blade play up and down. It's definitely an older knife. But despite all that, I actually really enjoy this knife. Also, look at those pretty ass Damascus bolsters. I'm not a huge fan of Damascus on my blades, just me personally, but on a bolster, on scales, on clips, on pivot collars, I love it. This thing is beautiful. Now here we have what I would consider to be a bad knife, but despite it being bad, I kind of love this thing. This knife is called Garuda by, I think it's STG Knives or SG Knives. And this thing has very bad lock failure. You can lock it out completely, put your finger right there, and then drop it down. But see, I like slip joints, and as long as I'm perfectly aware that the knife is going to close on me, I can take basic precautions. I'm not gonna do like stabbing cuts or anything like that. So this very dangerous, very sketchy knife has never actually cut me before. But what it does have is a very interesting and kind of fidget-friendly way to close it, which is again, just dropping that piece down. Also, the action is freaking crazy. I mean, again, it's not properly locking blades, so it's not, good. But despite it all, I enjoyed this knife. Would I recommend it? Hell no. The seller did not know it had these issues. And honestly, once I got it in the hand and started playing with it, I was like, you know what, man, this is pretty cheap for a custom. I don't mind, and this is kind of fun. Now, despite the size of my hands, you guys know I love the 940. This is a very old version of it, first production run, almost 20 years. And I have put this knife through hell. And it looks pretty damn good still. It's been sent off to Benchmade to be sharpened. I'm not sure how many times, at least 20 or 30. I've sharpened it myself before with varying degrees of success. This thing has gone through boxes, paper, food prep, like pretty much everything you can think of this knife has been used for. I've dug holes with it for, I don't know, reasons. Again, 20-year-old knife. When I first got this knife, I was a child. And as a child, I did stupid things like children do, and it still survived it, and it survives it now as an adult. The 940 is genuinely an inheritance piece. There are very few knives that I know of that last that long and still look just fine and function just fine, and the Benchmade 940 definitely is one of those knives. A lot of folks hate on it, and that's fine, it's your guys' personal opinion. Me personally, I love it, and this thing has proven itself a million times over in my eyes. Next up is the Riot Hollowed Valhalla, which is one of my absolute favorite flippers. It is a smaller knife, like this takes up all of my hands. It's not the most comfortable thing in hand, but it's also not bad at all. I absolutely love the way this knife looks, and fantastic action. Riot pretty much always makes great knives. This is no exception. This is fantastic. You can actually find these knives pretty cheap on the secondary market, and if you ever find one, buy one. It's amazing. I love this knife. Now here we have an access lock done right, and it's not even done by Benchmade. The Ritter Hogue is insanely smooth. It will bounce out if you're not very careful with it. I mean, it takes like just a fraction of pressure for this knife to actually close, because it drops down like an absolute laser beam. Like, this thing is nuts. Heavily textured G10 scales, M390 blade, and this thing is just, it's very fidget friendly, but it's also a fantastic worker, and the edge geometry is just truly and genuinely phenomenal. Next up is an OTF. This is the Microtech Knives Dirac Delta. This is actually a proof run of this knife. These actually sell for a pretty penny now, folks. But it's just honestly a great knife. I'm a big fan of OTFs. The dagger blade, in terms of actual use, is kind of sketchy. I've done this and then did a push cut way too many times. It just gashed the hell out of my thumb. But as long as you remember that it's going to cut you, it's actually a very solid utilitarian blade. I have dulled one side, turned around, and dulled the other. That's a beautiful thing. Mind you though, at 204p, it took a long time to dull this knife, and honestly, 204p is a great steal. Here's a weird one. This is the Schatt and Morgan Coke bottle knife. This thing is massive. This is a 5-inch blade on a slip joint. Look at that. It's like a gigantic sword slash butter knife. But the ergonomics are really good. Fantastic action, beautiful walk and talk. This is one of 50 ever actually made. So pretty rare, kind of coveted. Beautiful ebony wood, brushed stainless steel bolsters. This is just a beautiful slip joint. Next up, we have a custom shop. This is a full-size Benchmade custom shop, Crooked River. Great action, fantastic ergonomics. Not the best ever, but definitely very, very good. Fantastic, probably a little bit generous. Fits my size 2XL hands very nicely. And this is also an S90V, folks. But S90V, as far as a light use knife, this is my box cutter. And this will be a box cutter for a very, very long time. And for that purpose, S90V is fantastic. Is it a user, beat around steel? Absolutely not. But as far as just an overall like using light use knife, this thing will pretty much never go dull, and that is a beautiful thing. But I can also snap it very, very easy. So beautiful, but a little sketchy sometimes. Now here we have a knife that genuinely and honestly continues to surprise me. The Spyderco Gale Bradley 2 is a knife that for my size of hands just should not work. It is so comfortable, it is so ergonomically sound, even though my finger is on a tool that doesn't actually exist, and my fingers parsed off the edge. This thing is still fantastic in hand. I genuinely am loving the Gale Bradley. I'm not one to baby my knives at all, so the uncoated M4 is kind of sketchy, but so far so good. And honestly, I actually drunk popped this knife, and I kind of love it in a way I never thought I would. So, drunk me, thank you, I guess. Now another knife I love as far as just being a user is the Benchmade Reptilian. This one, as you see, is in 154 cm because this is an old ass Reptilian. I've had this for a long time, and honestly, I've just beat the hell out of this thing, man. I don't know how this is still alive, but it is, and it even still looks good. But I decided to upgrade. Here is a sheep's foot Reptilian with very beautiful scales. I love these scales. The guy I bought these from also included a backspacer, a couple backspacers actually, another set of scales, the old school black ones, and just a whole bunch of extra goodies. So brother, if you're watching this video, I love this thing, man. But the sheep's foot version of the Reptilian is fantastic. This is also an S30V steel. 20 CV is a great steel, but for like a really hard use knife, 20 CV can snap. S30V is actually pretty tough, so it's very boring. But in this case, I think it actually works really well. Benchmade, full size Reptilian, modded out the game, and I love it. Here we have a $1,300 CKF Saka, I can never say that weird ass name, one-off. And this knife, man, is fantastic. Beautiful milled out carbon fiber with titanium right there. You literally cannot feel the transition. It's absolutely flawless. Orange peeled and flame titanium backspacer. The actual liners are done the same all throughout. It's beautiful, very subtle recurved blade. Has this very nice little texture to it. Very cool fit and finish, a little bit of coloration. And this very interesting clip that is actually super functional. Low key, this knife is one of the best clips I've ever actually used. It is fantastic. Great action, great ergonomics, great materials, and a fantastic knife. I love this thing. I've been using this knife for years, and you can barely even tell because it's just made fantastic. Now, there was a point where, like most of you, I just got obsessed with front clippers. I tried a chamois, a full production chamois, a full custom chamois, a whole bunch of Gareth Bull knives. Pretty much every front clipper you could think of, I've had in my hand. And I sold them all as soon as I had the full custom Seraphim knives Yakuza. Because, simply put, this knife has the best action, the best ergonomics, the best cut yourself in a heartbeat drop shut action. An absolutely beautiful blade of M390. This thing is an absolute laser beam. Nice fiery purple Mokutai clip. There is actual gold in this carbon fiber, which I just think is amazing. Mokutai bolster. And overall, I just think this knife is incredible. This is my favorite gents carry by far. Like whenever I'm wearing a suit or I just want to feel fancy as hell, I carry this thing. And the way it cuts it's just honestly incredible. This knife is the best front flipper I've ever handled by a very large margin. This company doesn't get any credit for it at all. Pretty funny, whenever you think about front flippers, you don't think about a Seraphim Knives Yakuza. There are so many other brands out there people immediately bring to mind, but for me, this is one of the best knives I've ever owned in my entire life, and I've owned, God, I don't even want to know how many. A lot. A whole goddamn lot. This thing is fucking marvelous. 10 out of 10. Perfect. Zero, no issues. Like, I love it. Now, to segue from that, let's talk about a knife that I don't love at all, but I love that it exists. So this is the Duhara Kabuto. I'm not Japanese. I don't want to say it wrong, but you get the idea. And this is a gravity knife. It is a button lock knife that has thumb studs that literally do not work. The knife locks inside this thing. But to be like, hey, you know, this knife is legal in more places. It has thumb studs, right? You have to roll it out to open it. No, you don't. The only way to open this knife is to press this button and it drops down, opens up, very nice. But these thumb studs are just a joke. This is like a long-running joke, I guess, because these do not work at all. No matter how much pressure you put on them, what you do, they will never actually deploy the knife. It is locked inside the actual scales until you press that button. This is a gravity knife. This is illegal almost everywhere, but it was sold almost everywhere because of thumb studs. It's hilarious to me. It's technically a crime. It's kind of a bad thing, I guess, but I collect weird knives. This is a weird ass knife, and the story behind it and why they did it is just funny to me. All right, here we have my baby. This is a full titanium Strider Knives SMF in a very interesting Tonto. Black oxide tiger stripe, which I'm normally not a fan of, but on this knife, I love it. Fantastic action. This thing is broken in so well. I love these Strider knives, SMF in general, man, but this version of it, this thing is the absolute grail for me. Like, this knife is incredible, and look, I got room. This thing fits my fat ass hands. It's close, it's kind of close, to be honest with you guys, but it does it. And it feels incredible, and the edge geometry is fantastic, and I love it so much. Now here we have a weird ass knife, but if you're a gun owner and you enjoy the kind of aesthetics of that style, you're probably gonna love this. This is the Hogue Knives Sig Sauer edition. This has decent action, not great, but I love the way this knife is designed. It's meant to look like an old school gun stock, and it just has so many little pieces here, like this thing right here. What the hell is this supposed to be? Like a nice skull crusher or whatever? Like, this thing is just so extra and so dumb. I love it. 154 cm steel, so it's a fantastic worker. This is also a pretty rare knife. They didn't make very many of these at all, and they've been discontinued for a long ass time. So I'm just happy to own this. This is just cool to me. The action is, again, okay. The drop shut, not really there. But this is fun, and I love it. All right, to end the video, I have a long-standing love-hate relationship with Medford Knife and Tool. They make models that I love with action that I don't, and for the most part, they're kind of polarizing, man. But this thing makes me happy in ridiculous ways. This is a full-size 2.6 Marauder with the smoothest, the most buttery, drop-shutty action I've ever felt on a Medford. Like, this thing is ridiculous. This thing kicks Chris Reeves' ass in terms of just smoothness. Chris Reeves' knives, they're probably better, let's be fair here. But just as far as how smooth it is to roll out, how smooth it is to drop down, like, this thing is nuts. It's S90V for a big, gigantic working blade, so that might go bad. I'm not sure yet. I've had this knife for about maybe 3 weeks or so. This is actually something that I drunk bought. And I opened this knife, I was like, what the hell is this? Got it in hand, rolled it out, and my heart just stopped beating for a second because I was in love. And this thing stole my soul, my heart, my being. I love this knife. I also got it for really, really cheap. Like, we're talking like a fraction, a like literal, very tiny fraction of what they actually cost to buy usually. So that's fantastic. Medford's secondary market is pretty bad in general, but this thing might have been given to me, and I will never sell it. I don't know why nobody bought it. It's the best .6 Marauder or .26 Marauder I've ever handled, I've ever seen. This thing is incredible. All right, so after all the editing, this might be a long video, it might not be, we'll have to see together. But as always, folks, I love you all. I got a whole lot more to show you. Yes, I have a shitload of knives. But as always, folks, I love you all. Please take care, and bye-bye.